For over 4 decades, one name was synonymous with professional wrestling. One man who took a regional carnival show and transformed it into a global entertainment behemoth, Vincent Kennedy McMahon. He wasn't just in charge of WWE, he was its on-screen villain, its driving force, and its untouchable king. He was a billionaire icon, a media titan who seemed invincible, a man who had stared down the U.S. government and won, crushed every competitor, and woven himself into the very fabric of pop culture. But every empire, no matter how grand, can fall. And the fall of Vince McMahon's empire wasn't just a fall. It was an earth-shattering collapse, an implosion fueled by secrets and scandals darker than any storyline he could have ever written for television. For decades, Vince McMahon was more than a man. He was an institution. But in a shocking turn of events, the empire he built came crashing down. This is the story of the 1-2 punch that ended his reign for good. Millions in hidden hush money payments that caused his own company to mislead its shareholders, and horrific trafficking allegations that have dethroned the king, seemingly for good. The story you're about to hear is one of absolute power, unchecked depravity, and a legacy now permanently stained by accusations almost too disturbing to believe. To understand the depth of this fall, you first have to grasp the staggering height from which Vince McMahon plummeted. This wasn't just some CEO losing his job. It was like a monarch being violently unseated from a throne he'd built with his own 2 hands. When McMahon purchased the World Wrestling Federation from his ailing father in 1982, professional wrestling was just a fragmented collection of local promotions. It was a handshake business, confined to smoky arenas and local TV channels. Vince saw something more. He envisioned a national, even global, spectacle. He saw sports entertainment. With a ruthless ambition that would become his trademark, he completely shattered the unwritten rules of the wrestling world. He poached talent from rival territories, used the new power of cable television and pay-per-view to beam his vision into millions of homes, and created larger-than-life superstars like Hulk Hogan. WrestleMania wasn't just a wrestling show, it was a cultural event, a Super Bowl of spectacle that blended celebrity, music, and high-octane drama. He was the ultimate puppet master, controlling every single aspect of his universe. He was the head writer, the director, the producer, and, in the ultimate power move, he made himself the greatest villain in his own story. The Mr. McMahon character, a tyrannical, power-mad billionaire who tormented his employees, was, in hindsight, a disturbingly close reflection of the real man. This character was a stroke of genius, blurring the lines between fiction and reality and making McMahon one of the most hated and therefore most successful heels in wrestling history. His power felt absolute. He was the majority shareholder, the chairman, and the CEO. Superstars who were household names were, in his eyes, just independent contractors with little to no leverage. He dictated who became a champion, who got fired, and how every story began and ended. He micromanaged everything, right down to the specific words announcers were allowed to say on air. He created a culture where his approval was the only thing that mattered, where his whims could make or break careers built over decades. This iron-fisted control went beyond the creative. In the 1990s, McMahon and the WWF faced a federal indictment over allegations of steroid distribution. It was a scandal that threatened to destroy his company. But in a stunning legal victory, McMahon was acquitted. The message was clear. Vince McMahon was untouchable. He had faced down the United States government and walked away unscathed. What chance did anyone else have? This victory cemented his aura of invincibility. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a conqueror. Through the Monday Night Wars against his rival WCW, he drove his competition out of business and absorbed their assets, creating a near monopoly on the industry. WWE became the undisputed pinnacle of the wrestling world, and Vince McMahon was its god. For years, rumors of his eccentricities, his volatile temper, and his controversial decisions swirled around the industry. But they were always just that, stories, whispers in the locker room, tales told by disgruntled former employees. No one could land a meaningful blow. His power, his wealth, and his army of lawyers created a fortress around him that seemed impenetrable. He was the king, and the king answered to no one. For a man who seemed so untouchable, the beginning of the end came from a familiar place, a secret payoff to cover up a sexual relationship. On June 15, 2022, the Wall Street Journal dropped a bombshell report that sent shockwaves through the wrestling world and Wall Street. The story alleged that the WWE board was investigating a secret $3 million settlement Vince McMahon had paid to a former female employee with whom he'd allegedly had a consensual affair. Crucially, the payment was designed to prevent the woman from discussing her relationship with him or making claims against the company. This was the first domino. While an affair might be a personal matter, using a secret non-disclosure agreement, NDA, to silence someone with a connection to the company was a serious corporate governance issue. For the first time, the board was forced to act against its king. An investigation was launched. Just 2 days after the story broke, on June 17, 2022, the unthinkable happened. Vince McMahon announced he was voluntarily stepping back as chairman and CEO pending the investigation's outcome. His daughter, Stephanie McMahon, was named interim CEO and chairwoman. It was a stunning development. The man who had been the face and fist of the company for 40 years was suddenly on the sidelines. But the story was far from over. The Wall Street Journal kept digging. Less than a month later, on July 8, 2022, a second, even more damaging report came out. It alleged that McMahon had paid over $12 million in hush money over 16 years to 4 different women to suppress allegations of sexual misconduct and infidelity. The claims now included a former wrestler who said McMahon coerced her into oral sex and then didn't renew her contract when she resisted further encounters. Another involved a WWE contractor who received unsolicited nude photos of McMahon from him, leading to a settlement of about $1 million. The sheer scale of the payments painted a picture not of a single indiscretion, but of a long-standing practice of using money to bury explosive allegations. The pressure became immense. On July 22, 2022, Vince McMahon did what no one ever thought he'd truly do. He announced his retirement. In a short tweet, the 76-year-old patriarch of sports entertainment was out. The company he built was now in the hands of his daughter Stephanie and a new co-CEO, Nick Khan. For a brief moment, it seemed like the end of an era. The king had abdicated his throne. But those who knew Vince McMahon knew one thing. He never, ever gives up without a fight. His retirement wasn't an ending. It was just a strategic retreat. The post-Vince McMahon era of WWE was, for a time, a breath of fresh air. His son-in-law, Paul Triple H Levesque, took over creative control, and fans and wrestlers praised the improved storylines. The company's stock was performing well. It seemed WWE could not only survive without Vince, but maybe even thrive. But behind the scenes, the exiled king was plotting his return. In late December 2022, McMahon told the WWE board he was coming back. He claimed it was to lead a strategic review that would likely end in a sale of the company. He argued that as the controlling shareholder, he was the only one who could pull off such a monumental deal. The board, however, unanimously advised him against it, fearing his return would destabilize the company. But Vince McMahon doesn't take no for an answer. In January 2023, he used his majority voting power to force his way back in. He removed several board members and installed himself and 2 allies, staging a boardroom coup. He was elected executive chairman of the board. Just days later, his daughter Stephanie, who had sided with the board, resigned entirely. It was a ruthless display of power. WWE was still his company. His goal of a sale moved at lightning speed. On April 3, 2023, the day after WrestleMania 39, it was announced that WWE would be acquired by Endeavor, the parent company of UFC. The two would merge to form a new publicly traded powerhouse called TKO Group Holdings, in a deal valuing WWE at $9.3 billion. And who would be at the head of this new company as executive chairman? None other than Vince McMahon. It was the ultimate power play. He'd been forced out in disgrace, only to return months later, sell the company he built for billions, and install himself in an even more powerful position. It seemed that, once again, Vince McMahon was truly untouchable. He had outmaneuvered everyone. But while he was focused on his corporate conquest, a legal time bomb was ticking, preparing to detonate with a force not even he could withstand. If the hush money scandal was the crack in the armor, the lawsuit filed on January 25, 2024, was the cannonball that shattered it completely. A former WWE employee named Janelle Grant filed a lawsuit in federal court against Vince McMahon, WWE, and former executive John Laurinaitis. The details in the 67-page filing were not just damning, they were horrific. They went far beyond misconduct, alleging a sickening pattern of sexual assault, exploitation, and human trafficking. According to the lawsuit, Grant was targeted by McMahon in 2019 while grieving the loss of her parents. He allegedly promised her a job at WWE headquarters in exchange for a physical relationship, which the suit describes as coercive and controlling. Grant alleges she was trapped, forced to submit to his demands, or face personal and professional ruin. The allegations are deeply graphic and disturbing. The lawsuit claims McMahon forced Grant into sexual acts, often during work hours at WWE headquarters. But the horror didn't stop there. The suit accuses McMahon of trafficking Grant to other men within WWE. He allegedly shared explicit photos and videos of her with numerous people, including other WWE executives. One of the most shocking parts of the lawsuit involves John Laurinaitis. Grant alleges that McMahon directed her to have a sexual relationship with Laurinaitis, and that both men sexually assaulted her together. The suit paints a picture of a corporate culture so poisoned by McMahon's power that this abuse could allegedly happen right under the company's nose. The lawsuit also mentions a prominent, though then unnamed, former UFC heavyweight champion and WWE star, widely understood to be Brock Lesnar. McMahon allegedly directed Grant to create personalized sexual content for this star to entice him to re-sign with WWE. The suit claims the wrestler requested a video of her urinating, and after McMahon showed it to him, the wrestler referred to her as a bitch. The lawsuit sought to void the $3 million NDA McMahon had Grant sign in 2022 when his wife discovered their affair. Grant alleged McMahon stopped paying after only $1 million, breaching the contract himself. These weren't just allegations of an affair anymore. This was a federal lawsuit alleging sex trafficking. It brought with it the specter of a federal criminal investigation, which had been quietly happening in the background. The Wall Street Journal reported that federal agents had executed a search warrant for McMahon's phone and that a grand jury had issued subpoenas for documents related to allegations of rape, sex trafficking, sexual assault, commercial sex transaction, harassment, or discrimination. This was the point of no return. The curtain had been pulled back on a potential criminal enterprise. The king was not just naked, he was accused of being a monster. The Janelle Grant lawsuit was a bombshell TKO Group Holdings couldn't ignore. The allegations were too severe and too legally perilous. Vince McMahon, the man who had just orchestrated the biggest deal of his life, was now the company's biggest liability. His position was utterly untenable. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Sponsors like Slim Jim paused their promotional activities. The media firestorm was relentless. For decades, Vince had controlled the narrative. Now, the horrific narrative of the lawsuit was the only story anyone was talking about. Just one day after the lawsuit was filed, on January 26, 2024, Vince McMahon resigned. This time, there was no talk of it being voluntary or temporary. He resigned from his position as executive chairman of TKO and from its board of directors, effective immediately. His reign was over, for good. In a statement, McMahon denied the allegations, calling the lawsuit replete with lies. He stated his intention to vigorously defend himself, but acknowledged he had to step down out of respect for the WWE Universe, the extraordinary TKO business and its board members and shareholders. The internal reaction at WWE was reportedly one of relief. The company immediately began the process of erasing him. His name, once spoken with a mixture of fear and reverence, became taboo. This was it. The final, definitive end. He had been forced out once and clawed his way back. But there was no coming back from this. The allegations were too heinous. While his lawyers have claimed a federal investigation is closed, public court documents have referred to it as ongoing and no official confirmation of its conclusion has been made. The man who defined professional wrestling for generations was now an outcast from his own kingdom. While the world was captivated by the sickening details of the trafficking lawsuit, the other half of the 1-2 punch was about to land. On January 10, 2025, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, announced it had settled charges with Vince McMahon. The charges weren't for minor accounting errors, as he claimed, but for knowingly circumventing his own company's internal controls and causing it to file false financial statements. The SEC order found McMahon had hidden a $3 million settlement in 2019 and a $7.5 million agreement in 2022 from WWE's board, lawyers, and auditors. Because he hid these payments, WWE's financial statements were materially misstated, with net income overstated by approximately 8% in 2018 and 1.7% in 2021. In essence, his efforts to hide his personal scandals led directly to his company misleading its shareholders. Without admitting or denying the findings, McMahon agreed to pay a $400,000 penalty and reimburse WWE for about $1.3 million in costs. Janelle Grant's attorney, Ann Callis, said the SEC settlement confirmed McMahon repeatedly broke the law to cover up his horrifying behavior. The charges gave legal weight to the idea that McMahon operated outside the law, a core part of Grant's argument. The legal pressure kept mounting. In a stunning development in May 2025, John Laurinaitis, McMahon's co-defendant, reached a confidential settlement with Janelle Grant and was dismissed from the lawsuit. A joint statement claimed Laurinaitis agreed to cooperate and provide evidence against McMahon and WWE, calling it a pivotal next step toward accountability. McMahon's legal team tried to downplay it, but the damage was done. The walls were closing in. The financial scandal confirmed by the SEC and the horrific allegations of the lawsuit, now potentially bolstered by a key figure, formed an inescapable combination. The two threads of his downfall, the hidden money and the hidden abuse, had become hopelessly intertwined. This is one of the most complex and disturbing stories in modern entertainment, and it is still unfolding. The civil lawsuit is ongoing, with a critical battle over whether the case will be heard in open court or forced into private arbitration. What do you think about these developments? Can WWE ever truly separate itself from the legacy of the man who built it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on this and other deep dives into major stories, make sure to subscribe. The legacy of Vincent Kennedy McMahon is now a story of two men. There's the visionary, the marketing genius, and the ruthless businessman, who turned a niche spectacle into a global phenomenon. That man changed entertainment and created moments and characters that will live on in the minds of millions. His contributions to the industry are, on a business level, undeniable. But there is another man, the man described in court documents, the man accused of depravity, of using his immense power to exploit, abuse, and silence people. The man who, according to the SEC, broke the law and deceived his own shareholders to cover his tracks. This is the man who now defines the final chapter of Vince McMahon's story. UE, now under the TKO banner and the creative leadership of Paul Levesque, is desperately trying to move forward. They want the world to see the company as separate from the man who created it. But can it ever be? His fingerprints are on every aspect of the promotion. The company's very culture was molded by his hands for 40 years. The recent return of Brock Lesnar to WWE programming, a man named in the Grant lawsuit, has been seen by critics as a sign the company is trying to sweep misconduct under the rug. For Vince McMahon, the fall is complete. He lost his company, his power, and his reputation. He now faces a future defined by courtrooms and lawyers' fees. His name forever linked not with WrestleMania, but with sex trafficking and financial scandal. There will be no triumphant return this time. There is only the long, dark shadow of the allegations, a shadow that has consumed the man, the myth, and the empire he built. The king is gone, and his throne is now a monument to the shocking and absolute nature of his downfall.